My dear brother, my dear sister, you didn't wake up like this overnight. This feeling didn't arrive suddenly. It wasn't like one day everything was normal and the next day everything felt empty. No, this happened slowly, quietly, almost so quietly that you didn't even notice it happening. At first, it was small, a conversation that didn't feel the same, a moment that should have made you happy but didn't reach your heart the way it used to. You laughed, but something inside you stayed silent. You sat with people but felt like you weren't really there. You were present but not connected, and you tried to ignore it. You told yourself, maybe I'm just tired. Maybe it's just stress. Maybe it's just a phase. But deep down, you knew something was changing, because the things that once gave you comfort slowly stopped working. The people you used to run to no longer felt like a place of peace. The distractions that once filled your time no longer filled your heart. And that's when the confusion started, because you weren't expecting this. You weren't prepared for this feeling. You didn't ask for this distance. So your mind starts searching for answers. Why do I feel like this? Why don't I enjoy things the same way anymore? Why does everything feel different? And sometimes you even begin to blame yourself. You think maybe you've become cold. Maybe you've changed in a bad way. Maybe something inside you is broken. But listen carefully, my dear brother, my dear sister. You are not broken. You are not becoming worse. You are not losing yourself. Something was taken away from you, but not in the way you think. Allah didn't remove people from your life. He removed your attachment to them. Allah didn't take away your environment. He changed how your heart feels within it. And that changes everything, because there is a big difference between something being present in your life and your heart being connected to it. Before, your heart was tied to things, tied to people, tied to moments, tied to feelings. You depended on them to feel okay. You depended on them to feel understood. You depended on them to feel alive. But what happens when those things cannot truly hold you? What happens when the very things you depend on are not strong enough to carry your heart? Eventually, they start to fail you. Not because they are bad, not because people are evil, but because they were never meant to carry the weight of your soul. And Allah in His mercy does not allow your heart to stay attached to what cannot sustain it. So He begins to shift something inside you, not loudly, not dramatically, but gently, quietly. He removes the sweetness from things that were distracting you. He takes away the emotional pull you once felt, so that slowly you begin to feel the truth that these things were never enough. And yes, this process feels uncomfortable, because when your heart loses attachment, it feels like loss. It feels like something is missing. It feels like you've been emptied. But what you don't realize is, this emptiness is not the end. It is the beginning. Because when your heart is full of the wrong things, there is no space for what is right. And Allah knows that if He keeps giving you comfort through people, through distractions, through temporary things, you may never turn back to Him. So instead, He gently removes your dependence, not your life, not your relationships, not your surroundings, but your dependence. And that is why you feel the way you feel. You sit with people, but your heart is no longer attached the same way. You go through your day, but something inside you is searching for more. You try to go back to what once made you feel okay, but it doesn't reach you anymore. And that's when the loneliness begins. Not because you are physically alone, but because your heart has been detached from what once filled it. And that kind of loneliness feels deeper. It feels heavier. Because it's not about who is around you, it's about what your heart can no longer feel. But my dear brother, my dear sister, this is where most people misunderstand what is happening to them. They think they are losing something, but in reality, they are being freed from something. Freed from dependence, freed from attachment, freed from building their emotional stability on things that cannot last. Because everything in this world changes. People change. Situations change, feelings change. And if your heart is tied to something that is always changing, then your peace will always be unstable. One moment you feel okay, the next moment you feel lost. One moment you feel connected, The next moment you feel empty. And Allah does not want your heart to live like that. He wants your heart to be anchored to something constant, something that does not change, something that does not leave, something that does not weaken. And that is Him. But to bring your heart back to Him, something else has to be loosened first. And that's what you're feeling right now. It's not punishment. It's not rejection. It's redirection, a quiet, gentle redirection of your heart. From creation back to the Creator. And yes, it feels lonely because your heart is in transition. It is leaving what it used to depend on, but has not yet fully settled into what it is being guided towards. And that space in between feels like emptiness, but it is not empty. It is being prepared. Think about this. When a cup is full, you cannot pour anything new into it. You have to empty it first. Even if that means pouring out what was once inside. And that moment when the cup is empty can feel like loss. But in reality, it is preparation because something better is about to fill it. And your heart is going through the same process. Allah is emptying it. Not to leave it empty, but to fill it with something deeper, something more stable, something more real. But before that happens, you have to feel the difference. You have to experience what it's like when the things you depended on no longer reach you. So that when your heart finally turns back to Allah, it does so sincerely. Not because someone told you to, not because you feel forced, but because you realize nothing else can hold you the way He can. And that realization only comes after this phase. So don't rush this feeling. Don't hate it. Don't think it means something is wrong with you. Because this quiet shift inside you is actually one of the most important moments of your life. It's the moment your heart begins to wake up. The moment it starts to see beyond temporary comfort. The moment it begins searching for something real. And yes, right now it feels like you lost something. But one day you will understand Allah didn't take something valuable away from you. He took away what was quietly draining you. So you could finally feel the difference. So you could finally see clearly. So you could finally begin the journey back to Him. You keep reaching for comfort, but nothing feels like it used to. My dear brother, my dear sister, after that first shift happens inside you, after your heart quietly begins to detach, you enter a phase that feels even more confusing. Because now you start trying to go back to what once made you feel okay, back to the same people, the same routines, the same places. You sit in the same conversations, you scroll through the same things, you surround yourself with the same environment, hoping that maybe this time it will feel like it used to, but it doesn't. Something inside you refuses to respond the same way. And that is where the frustration begins. Because now it's not just emptiness, it's confusion mixed with resistance. You start asking yourself, why can't I just feel normal again? Why is nothing working anymore? Why do I feel disconnected from things that used to comfort me? And deep down, there's a quiet fear. A fear that maybe you've lost something important. That maybe you've lost your ability to feel joy. That maybe this emptiness is permanent. But listen carefully, because what you're experiencing right now is not loss. It's transformation. You are not losing your ability to feel. You are losing your attachment to what was never meant to hold you in the first place. And that is a very different thing. Because before, your heart found temporary relief in certain things. Maybe it was people. Maybe it was constant conversation. Maybe it was distractions that kept your mind busy. Maybe it was attention. Maybe it was being understood by someone. And those things made you feel okay. They gave you a sense of comfort, a sense of belonging, a sense of relief from whatever you were carrying inside. But here's the truth. They didn't heal you. They only covered what was unresolved. They only distracted you from what needed attention. They only delayed the moment when your heart would finally have to face what it truly needs. And Allah in His mercy does not allow you to stay dependent on temporary relief forever. Because if you keep finding comfort in what cannot heal you, you will never search for what actually can. So what does He do? He doesn't remove those things from your life completely. He doesn't always take people away. He doesn't always change your environment. Instead, He changes your heart's response to them so that even when those things are still there, they no longer satisfy you. They no longer fill the space inside you. They no longer reach you the same way. And that is why you feel stuck, because you're still reaching for the same things, but your heart has already moved past them. You're trying to go back, but your soul is being pulled forward. And that tension, that pull between the past and what's coming, is what creates this heaviness, this inner resistance, this quiet frustration you can't explain to anyone. You try to act normal. You try to respond the same way. You try to enjoy things the same way. But it feels forced. It feels incomplete. Like something inside you is saying, this is not it anymore. And that voice is not random. It's guidance. It's Allah gently showing you that your heart is ready for something deeper. But the problem is, we don't like leaving what we are familiar with. Even if it's not good for us, even if it doesn't truly fulfill us, we still hold on to it because it's comfortable, because it's known, because it's easy. And when that comfort is taken away, or even when the feeling of comfort is taken away, we panic. We try to fix it. We try to recreate the old feeling. We try to force our heart back into something it has already outgrown. But my dear brother, my dear sister, you cannot force your heart to feel something Allah has removed from it. You cannot go back to a version of yourself that Allah is already rewriting. And that is why nothing feels the same. Not because life is worse, but because your heart is no longer the same. And this is one of the most important signs of growth. Even though it doesn't feel like growth, because real growth doesn't always feel good. Sometimes it feels like loss. Sometimes it feels like confusion. Sometimes it feels like everything that once made sense no longer fits. But that is exactly how transformation begins. Think about this. If everything still satisfied you the same way, if people still filled your heart the same way, if distractions still worked the same way, would you ever look for something deeper? Would you ever question your direction? Would you ever turn back to Allah with sincerity? Most likely, you wouldn't. You would stay exactly where you are, comfortable but unfulfilled, busy but disconnected, surrounded but still empty deep inside. And Allah does not want that for you. He doesn't want you to settle for a life that only looks okay on the outside, but feels empty on the inside. So He changes something within you so that you can no longer ignore that emptiness, so that you can no longer escape it, so that you are forced, not in a harsh way, but in a gentle, quiet way, to search for something real. And that search is what brings you back to Him. But before that happens, you have to experience this phase where nothing works, where nothing satisfies, where everything feels slightly off. Because this is the phase where your heart is being redirected. It's no longer accepting temporary comfort. It's no longer settling for surface level connection. It's no longer being fulfilled by what once distracted it. And yes, that feels uncomfortable because now you don't know where to turn. What used to work doesn't work anymore. But what is meant to replace it has not fully settled in your heart yet. So you feel in between, not connected to the past and not fully grounded in what's coming next. And that in-between feeling is one of the hardest places to be. But it is also one of the most important, because this is where sincerity is born. This is where your heart begins to search for Allah. Not because it's routine, not because it's habit, but because nothing else is enough anymore. You begin to sit in silence, and instead of running from it, you start listening. You begin to feel that emptiness, and instead of covering it, you start questioning it. And slowly, very slowly, your heart starts to turn. Not all at once, not perfectly, but sincerely, because now you understand that what you were reaching for was never meant to carry you, and what you are being guided towards is the only thing that can. So don't be afraid of this phase. Don't try to rush back into what no longer feels right. Don't force yourself to feel something that your heart has already outgrown, because this discomfort, this quiet dissatisfaction, this inability to feel the same way again is not a problem. It is protection. It is guidance. It is Allah gently closing the door on what cannot hold you, so that you don't mistake it for your home again. And one day, you will look back at this exact phase, the phase where nothing felt the same. And you will realize this was the moment your heart refused to settle for anything less than what it truly needed. And that refusal was the beginning of something much greater. This silence you're sitting in is not empty, it's active. My dear brother, my dear sister, after the confusion, after the frustration of nothing feeling the same anymore, you enter a space that feels even heavier, a space that is quiet, too quiet. It's not just that things don't satisfy you anymore. It's that now everything feels still. You wake up and there's no excitement. You go through your day and it feels like you're just moving, not living. You sit in moments where your mind isn't distracted, and suddenly the silence feels loud, uncomfortable, almost suffocating. And in that silence, thoughts start to appear. Feelings you avoided before now sit in front of you. Questions you never asked yourself begin to rise, and you don't like it because this silence feels empty, like nothing is happening, like you've been paused, like your life has slowed down while everyone else keeps moving forward. And you start to wonder, why does it feel like everything stopped for me? Why is my life so quiet right now? Why do I feel stuck, like nothing is changing? But listen carefully, my dear brother, my dear sister. The silence is not empty. It is active. It is one of the most active, powerful phases of your life. But it just doesn't look like it. Because we have been taught to believe that progress is loud, that growth is visible, that change should feel exciting, that something must be happening on the outside for it to be real. But that is not how Allah works within you. The deepest changes, the most important transformations, they don't happen in front of people. They don't happen in noise. They don't happen in constant movement. They happen in stillness, in silence, in those moments where nothing seems to be happening, but everything inside you is being rearranged. Think about it. When your life was loud, when you were constantly distracted, constantly talking, constantly surrounded, did you ever truly sit with yourself? Did you ever truly listen to your own heart? Or were you just moving from one distraction to another without ever pausing long enough to feel what was really inside? Because silence forces you to face what noise allows you to escape. And that's why it feels uncomfortable. Because now you can't run from yourself anymore. You can't cover your thoughts with distractions. You can't hide your feelings behind conversations. You can't avoid the questions that your heart has been carrying. And yes, that feels heavy. It feels like pressure. Because suddenly, everything you've been avoiding, everything you've been pushing away, everything you've been ignoring is right there in front of you, and you don't know what to do with it. But what if this is exactly where Allah wants you to be? Not running, not distracted, not escaping, but sitting, feeling, thinking, reflecting, because this is where clarity begins. Not when your life is full of noise, but when it is quiet enough for you to hear the truth. And the truth is, your heart has been trying to speak to you for a long time, but it couldn't, because you were too busy listening to everything else. So Allah creates this silence, not to punish you, but to give your heart a voice, a space where it can finally be heard. And that's why this phase feels different, because now you're not just living on the surface anymore. You're being pulled deeper, deeper into yourself, deeper into your thoughts, deeper into your connection with Allah. And depth always feels heavier than surface, because surface is easy, surface is light. Surface doesn't require you to think deeply or feel deeply, but depth requires you to face things, to understand things, to confront parts of yourself that you may have ignored for a long time. And that is not easy, but it is necessary, because without the silence, you would continue living without awareness, without understanding, without real connection. You would continue filling your life with things that look meaningful, but feel empty. So Allah removes the noise and gives you silence instead. And in that silence, He begins to work on you quietly, without announcement, without display, without people seeing it. He begins to rearrange your thoughts to realign your priorities, to expose what is truly in your heart, to show you what matters and what never really did. And sometimes this process feels slow, painfully slow, because you want movement, you want change, you want something to happen that you can see. But Allah is not working on what you can see right now. He is working on what you cannot see, because what is inside you is what shapes everything outside of you. And if that is not fixed, nothing else will ever feel right. So He takes you into this quiet phase, this still phase, this phase where everything feels paused, not because your life is on hold, but because your foundation is being rebuilt. And rebuilding takes time. It takes patience. It takes moments where it looks like nothing is happening. But in reality, everything is being prepared. And my dear brother, my dear sister, this silence you're sitting in right now, it is not something to fear. It is something to understand. Because this is where Allah speaks to you in ways that noise never allowed. Not always with words, not always with clear answers, but with feelings, with realizations, with a deeper awareness of things you never noticed before. You start to see things differently. You start to question things differently. You start to feel a shift, even if you can't fully explain it. And that shift is the beginning of transformation. But it only happens when you stay in the silence long enough to receive it. If you keep running back to noise, if you keep trying to fill every quiet moment, if you keep escaping this phase, you will delay what Allah is trying to build inside you. So instead of running from the silence, sit with it. Even if it feels uncomfortable, even if it feels heavy, even if it feels like nothing is happening, because something is happening, something deep, something real, something that will shape who you become. And one day, you will look back at this quiet phase, this phase where you thought nothing was happening, and you will realize this was the moment everything inside you began to change. This was the moment your heart started to wake up. This was the moment Allah began speaking to you in a way you could finally hear. So don't rush this silence. Don't misunderstand it, because what feels like emptiness is actually one of the most active, powerful moments of your life. You just can't see it yet. But one day you think you're being isolated, but you're being called somewhere higher. My dear brother, my dear sister, there comes a point in this journey where the feeling changes again. It's no longer just emptiness. It's no longer just silence. Now, it starts to feel like distance, a strange kind of distance. You're around people, but you don't feel fully with them. You hear them, but something inside you feels separate. You try to engage, but your heart doesn't fully follow. And that's when the thought begins to settle deeper inside you. Why do I feel so disconnected from everyone? Why does it feel like I don't belong the same way anymore? Why can't I just be like I used to be? And sometimes this feeling scares you, because human beings are not meant to feel isolated. We are created to connect, to belong, to feel understood. So when that sense of connection starts to weaken, your heart interprets it as loss, as rejection, as something going wrong. But listen carefully, my dear brother, my dear sister. What if this is not rejection? What if this is selection? What if you're not being pushed away, but being pulled somewhere else? Because there are moments in life where Allah begins to take you on a different path. A path that not everyone around you is meant to walk. A path that requires a different mindset, a different focus, a different level of awareness. And to step into that path, something has to change. Your environment may stay the same, the people around you may stay the same, but your heart, your connection, your sense of belonging, it begins to shift. Not because those people are bad, not because you are better, but because your direction is changing. And when your direction changes, your connection to certain things naturally becomes lighter. And that lightness feels like distance. You start to notice conversations don't hold your attention the same way. Topics that once interested you now feel empty. Moments that once excited you now feel quiet. And you don't understand why. Because nothing on the outside has changed, but everything on the inside is shifting. And this is where most people make a mistake. They try to force themselves back into what they used to be. They try to fit back into the same spaces, the same conversations, the same version of themselves, because they don't want to feel this distance. They don't want to feel different. They don't want to feel alone. But my dear brother, my dear sister, you cannot return to a place your soul has already outgrown. You cannot force connection where your heart has been gently detached. And that detachment is not something to fear. It is something to understand, because Allah does not isolate you to harm you. He isolates you to prepare you. Preparation always requires separation. Think about it. When something is being refined, it is separated from everything else. When something is being elevated, it is taken to a different level. And that process often feels lonely, because not everyone can come with you. Not everyone will understand what you're going through. Not everyone will see what is changing inside you. And that's okay, because this journey is not meant to be understood by everyone. It's meant to be experienced by you. And yes, it feels uncomfortable. It feels like you're losing connection, like you're drifting away, like you don't belong anywhere anymore. But what if you're not losing belonging? What if your sense of belonging is being redirected? Because before, you found belonging in people, in conversations, in environments. But now, Allah is teaching your heart to find belonging in Him. And that shift does not happen while you are deeply attached to everything else. It happens when those attachments become lighter, when your heart begins to let go, even if you don't fully understand why. And that's why this phase feels so strange, because you are in between. You are no longer who you used to be, but you have not fully stepped into who you are becoming. You are no longer deeply connected to your old environment, but you have not yet fully settled into your new direction. And that in-between space feels like isolation, but it is not permanent. It is transitional. It is the bridge between two versions of you. The version that depended on everything around them, and the version that will stand with a deeper, quieter strength. And my dear brother, my dear sister, this process is necessary. Because if you remained fully connected to everything as it was before, you would carry the same mindset, the same attachments, the same limitations into the next stage of your life. And that would hold you back. So Allah creates this distance, not to make you feel abandoned, but to make space for something new. A new way of thinking, a new way of feeling, a new way of connecting. One that is not based on constant validation, not based on needing people to feel okay, but based on something deeper, something more stable, something rooted in your connection with Him. And that connection cannot grow in a crowded heart. It needs space. It needs quiet. It needs moments where you feel alone enough to turn inward, to reflect, to reconnect. And that's what this phase is giving you, even if it doesn't feel like it. So don't be afraid of this distance. Don't think it means something is wrong with you. Don't force yourself to go back to what no longer feels right. Because this feeling, this quiet separation, this sense of being different, is not a sign that you're losing your place. It's a sign that your place is changing. And yes, right now it feels like you don't belong anywhere. But one day you will understand you were not meant to belong everywhere. You were being guided to belong somewhere deeper, somewhere quieter, somewhere more real. And most importantly, to belong with Allah in a way you never did before. And when that connection settles in your heart, this feeling of isolation will no longer feel like loneliness. It will feel like peace. Because you will realize you were never truly alone. You were just being led somewhere not everyone was meant to follow. And that is not something to fear. It is something to be honored, because not everyone is taken on that journey, but you were. And even if it feels heavy right now, it is leading you to a version of yourself that will one day understand why this distance was necessary. So trust it. Even if you don't fully understand it yet, because sometimes the path that feels the most lonely is the one that leads you closest to Allah. This pain isn't just sadness. It's detachment breaking inside you. My dear brother, my dear sister, at this stage, the feeling becomes even deeper. It's no longer just silence. It's no longer just distance. Now, it becomes pain. A quiet, heavy pain. The kind you can't fully explain to anyone. The kind that sits in your chest without a clear reason. Sometimes it comes suddenly. You could be doing something normal, and out of nowhere, your heart feels heavy. You feel a wave of sadness, but you don't know what exactly caused it. No one said anything. Nothing bad happened. And yet, you feel like something inside you is breaking, and that confuses you. Because when we feel pain, we look for a clear reason. We want to say, it's because of this person. It's because of this situation. It's because something went wrong. But this pain doesn't always come with a clear explanation. And that's why it feels even heavier, because you don't know how to fix it. You don't know what to point to. You don't know what exactly you're grieving. But listen carefully, my dear brother, my dear sister. This pain is not random. It is not meaningless. It is not a sign that something is wrong with you. This pain is detachment. It is your heart being pulled away from things it once held tightly. And detachment always hurts. Because attachment creates comfort. Attachment creates familiarity. Attachment creates a sense of security. Even if that security was temporary, even if that comfort was not real, your heart still held on to it. Your heart still depended on it. Your heart still believed, this is what makes me feel okay. And now that connection is being loosened, not by you, but by Allah. And when something your heart is attached to begins to slip away, even if it's just emotionally, it feels like loss. It feels like something is being taken from you. It feels like you are being emptied. And that is why you feel this pain, because your heart is letting go. Even if your mind doesn't fully understand it yet, you may still think about certain people. You may still remember certain moments. You may still wish things felt the same, but your heart is no longer holding on to them the same way. And that difference creates a kind of grief, a grief that is quiet, a grief that is internal, a grief that doesn't always have a clear name, because you are not just losing people, you are losing attachment, you are losing dependence, you are losing the emotional weight, those things once carried in your heart, and that process feels like something is breaking. But what if something is not breaking, but being released? Because sometimes what feels like pain is actually freedom beginning. But freedom does not always feel good at first. Especially when you were used to being attached. Especially when you were used to depending on certain things. Especially when your identity, your comfort, your emotional stability was tied to something outside of you. When that starts to loosen, it shakes you. It makes you feel unstable. It makes you feel like you don't know yourself the same way anymore. Because the things that once defined how you feel no longer have the same control over you. And that is not weakness. That is transformation. But transformation always comes with discomfort. Because your heart is being retrained. It is being taught to stop depending on what cannot sustain it. And that is not easy. Imagine holding something tightly for a long time. Your hands get used to it. They become comfortable with that grip. Now imagine slowly letting go. Your hands feel empty, uncomfortable, even though they are now free. That is exactly what your heart is experiencing. It is learning to let go. But it hasn't yet adjusted to that freedom. So instead of feeling relief, you feel pain. Instead of feeling light, you feel heavy. Because you are in the middle of the process. Not fully attached anymore, but not yet fully free. And that in between is one of the most painful places to be. But my dear brother, my dear sister, this pain has purpose. It is not there to break you. It is there to cleanse you, to purify your heart from attachments that were never meant to define you. Because when your heart is too attached to something, it gives it power. Power to affect your peace. Power to control your emotions, power to shape your state. And Allah does not want anything in your life to have that level of control over you except Him. So He gently removes that power Not always by removing the thing itself, but by removing your attachment to it. And that removal feels like pain. But it is actually protection from building your life, your happiness, your stability on something that can disappear. Because anything that can disappear cannot be the foundation of your peace. So Allah shifts your heart. He loosens the attachment. He breaks the emotional dependency. And yes, it hurts, but only because your heart was holding on tightly. And the tighter you hold on to something, the more it hurts when it is released. But ask yourself this: would you rather stay attached to something that cannot truly hold you, or go through this temporary pain and become free from it? Because on the other side of this pain is a different kind of strength, a quieter strength, a strength where your peace is no longer controlled by people, where your emotions are no longer dependent on circumstances, where your heart feels lighter, not because everything is perfect, but because it is no longer tied down. And that strength can only be built through this process, through this letting go, through this breaking of attachment. So don't misunderstand your pain. Don't think it means you are weak. Don't think it means something is wrong with you, because what you're feeling is one of the most important shifts your heart will ever go through. It is the moment where your heart begins to belong less to the world and more to Allah. And yes, right now it feels like something is being taken from you. But one day you will realize you were not being emptied, you were being freed. Freed from what once controlled your heart. Freed from what quietly drained your peace. Freed from what could never truly carry you. And that freedom begins with this pain. So be patient with it. Sit with it. Understand it. Because this is not the end of your strength. It is the beginning of it. And one day you will look back at this feeling, this deep, unexplainable pain, and you will say, this was the moment my heart learned to let go for the sake of something greater. When everything feels distant, it means one door is being left open. My dear brother, my dear sister, by the time you reach this stage, it can feel like everything has faded. Not disappeared completely, but faded. People are still there. Your life is still moving. Your routines still exist. But something about everything feels distant. Like there's a thin layer between you and the world. You're present, but not fully connected. You respond, but something inside you feels quiet. You go through your day, but your heart feels somewhere else. And this is where the feeling becomes very real. Because now it's not just about detachment. It feels like everything is slipping away from you. You start to notice it clearly. Conversations feel shallow. Moments feel temporary. Even the things that once gave you comfort feel like they can't reach you anymore. And that's when a deeper thought begins to form inside you. Why does it feel like everything is closing on me? Why does it feel like I'm losing connection with everything around me? Why does it feel like nothing is left? And if you're not careful, your heart can begin to interpret this as loss. As if life is becoming empty, as if you're being left with nothing. But listen carefully, my dear brother, my dear sister. Not everything is closing. One door is being left open. You just haven't fully turned towards it yet. Because when everything else starts to feel distant, there is still one place your heart keeps returning to. Even if you don't realize it, even if it's quiet, even if it's not perfect, there is still something inside you that turns towards Allah. Maybe it's in the moments of silence. Maybe it's when you feel overwhelmed. Maybe it's when your chest feels heavy. And without thinking, you whisper a small dua. Maybe it's when you sit alone and your thoughts slowly begin to shift towards Him. That pull, that quiet return, that is the door that was never closed. Everything else may feel distant. Everything else may feel like it's fading. But that connection is still there, and it always will be. Because Allah never removes Himself from you. He removes everything else so you can finally notice Him. And that's why this phase feels so intense. Because for the first time, your heart is not being distracted by everything else. For the first time, you are starting to feel what remains when everything else fades. And what remains is your connection with Allah. But here's the thing. We are so used to filling our lives with many doors We keep multiple sources of comfort, multiple places to turn, multiple things to depend on. So when one thing doesn't work, we run to another. When one person doesn't understand us, we find someone else. When one distraction fades, we replace it with another. And in doing so, we never fully realize where our heart truly belongs, because we always have something else to lean on. But now, Allah is removing those extra doors one by one. Not always physically, but emotionally. So that when you try to run back to them, they don't feel the same. They don't open the same. They don't comfort you the same way. And slowly, you begin to realize there is only one place left where your heart finds even a small sense of relief. And that place is with Allah. Even if your connection is weak, even if your prayers feel heavy, even if your focus is not perfect, even if you feel distant even in your worship, there is still something there. A pull, a quiet presence, a feeling that this is where your heart is meant to return. And that realization is one of the most powerful shifts you will ever experience. Because now your heart is no longer scattered. It is no longer divided between many things. It is being guided towards one direction. And yes, this feels uncomfortable at first, because you are used to having many sources of comfort. You are used to having options. You are used to escaping into different things. But now you are being gently brought to a place where there is only one true source. And that requires you to face something, to face the reality that nothing else can carry you the way Allah can. Not people, not distractions, not temporary comforts. Because all of those things fade. They change, they fail, but Allah does not. And that is why He leaves this door open, even when everything else feels closed, even when your heart feels tired, even when your life feels confusing. That connection remains. And the more everything else fades, the more visible that connection becomes. But my dear brother, my dear sister, this is where you have a choice. You can continue trying to go back to doors that no longer open the same way. You can continue reaching for things that your heart has already outgrown. You can continue trying to fill the space with what used to work. Or you can turn towards the door that has been open all along, even if it feels unfamiliar, even if it feels difficult, even if you don't feel ready, because that door leads to something different, something deeper, something more stable, a connection that is not based on temporary feelings, but on something that does not change. And the more you turn towards it, the more your heart begins to settle, not instantly, not perfectly, but gradually, because real peace is not loud, it is not overwhelming, it is quiet, it grows slowly, it builds within you over time, and it comes from knowing that even if everything else fades, you are still connected to something that will never leave you. So don't be afraid of this feeling. Don't be afraid when everything feels distant, because that distance is not emptiness. It is direction. It is Allah gently guiding your heart away from what cannot hold you, towards what always can. And one day, you will look back at this phase, the phase where everything felt like it was slipping away, and you will realize nothing was being taken from you. You were being shown what truly remains. And that realization will change everything, because you will no longer fear losing what fades. You will only hold on to what stays. And what stays is Allah. You think you lost something important, but you were saved from it. My dear brother, my dear sister, by this stage, the feeling becomes even more personal, because now it's not just about distance, not just about silence, not just about emptiness. Now your heart starts going back to specific people, back to certain memories, back to moments that once felt meaningful. You begin to think about what you had, what you felt, what things used to be like. And a quiet thought begins to repeat inside you. If I just had that back, I'd feel okay again. If that person was still close, I wouldn't feel like this. If things didn't change, I wouldn't be this lost. And the more you think about it, the more it feels like you've lost something important, something valuable, something that once held your heart together. And that thought can become very convincing because your mind starts replaying the good parts, the comfort, the connection, the feeling of being understood. And slowly you begin to believe that what you lost was your source of peace. But listen carefully, my dear brother, my dear sister. Not everything you miss was good for you, and not everything that felt like peace was actually protecting your heart. Because sometimes what feels like comfort is actually dependence. And dependence can quietly weaken you without you even realizing it. You start building your emotional stability around something. You start depending on it to feel okay, to feel valued, to feel understood. And over time, that thing begins to hold power over your heart. Your mood depends on it. Your peace depends on it. Your sense of stability depends on it. And that is a dangerous place for your heart to be. Because anything you depend on that deeply has the ability to break you when it changes. And everything in this world changes. People change. Feelings change. Circumstances change. So if your heart is built around something that can change, then your peace will always be at risk. And Allah in His mercy does not allow your heart to be built on something unstable forever. Because He knows what you don't see. He sees where that attachment would have led you. He sees how deeply you would have depended on it. He sees how much control it would have had over your heart. And most importantly, He sees how much it would have hurt you later. So instead of letting you go deeper into that dependence, He intervenes, not always loudly, not always in a way you understand, but in a way that protects you. He removes it, or He changes your connection to it, or He creates distance that you didn't choose. And in that moment, it feels like loss. It feels like something was taken from you. It feels like you were left with less. But what if you were actually saved from something? Saved from a deeper attachment, saved from a stronger dependence, saved from a future where losing that thing would have broken you even more. Because the truth is, you don't always know what's best for your heart. You know what feels good. You know what brings comfort. You know what gives you temporary relief. But Allah knows what will truly protect you, what will truly strengthen you, what will truly bring you closer to Him. And sometimes those two things are not the same. What you want and what is best for you are not always aligned. And that's where trust becomes difficult, because you look at your situation and all you see is what you lost. But Allah looks at your situation and sees what you were saved from. And there is a big difference between those two perspectives. You see absence. He sees protection. You see something missing. He sees something removed for your safety. And until you understand that, your heart will continue to feel like it lost something valuable. But once you begin to see it differently, something shifts. You start to question your assumptions. You start to realize, maybe what I lost was not meant to carry me. Maybe what I miss was not meant to stay. Maybe what felt like peace was not actually protecting me. And that realization does not come instantly. It comes slowly. As you begin to see things more clearly, as you begin to understand yourself more deeply, as you begin to notice how your heart is becoming less dependent, less controlled, less tied down. And that is where the hidden mercy begins to appear. Because now your peace is no longer attached to something that can disappear. Now your heart is not as easily shaken. Now your emotions are not as controlled by external things. And that is a kind of strength you didn't have before. But it only came because something was removed. Something you thought you needed. Something you thought you couldn't live without. And yet, here you are, still breathing, still moving, still growing. Even if it feels heavy, even if it feels slow, even if it doesn't feel complete yet, you are still here. And that means you were not destroyed, you were redirected. But my dear brother, my dear sister, this is where patience is needed. Because your heart is still adjusting. It is still letting go of what it once held tightly. It is still learning to see things differently. And that takes time. So don't rush yourself. Don't force yourself to feel okay immediately. Don't pretend that you don't miss what you lost. Because missing something does not mean it was good for you. It just means your heart was attached to it. And attachment takes time to release. But as that attachment fades, clarity grows. And one day, you will look back at what you thought you lost and you will see it clearly. You will see what you couldn't see before. You will understand what Allah protected you from. You will realize why that distance was necessary. And in that moment, your heart will feel something different. Not pain, not confusion, but gratitude. Gratitude for something you once questioned. Gratitude for something you once resisted. Gratitude for something that once hurt you. Because now you understand it wasn't taken from you to break you. It was taken from you to protect you. And that changes everything. Because now you no longer chase what you lost. You trust what was removed. And that trust brings a kind of peace that nothing else ever could. So be patient with this phase. Be gentle with your heart. Because what feels like loss right now is actually one of the greatest forms of protection you've ever received. You just can't see it fully yet. But one day you will. And when you do, you will thank Allah for not giving you what you thought you needed. Because He gave you something better. Even if it didn't feel like it at first, there is something deeper happening here. Something most people don't realize. You think you're missing a person. You think you're missing a moment. You think you're missing a version of your life that once felt complete. But if you sit quietly with your heart, if you really listen to what you're feeling, you'll begin to notice something different. You're not just missing them. You're missing who you were when they were in your life. The version of you that felt lighter. The version of you that felt understood. The version of you that didn't carry this weight. And that realization can be even more painful. Because now it's not just about someone else. It's about you. It's about a version of yourself that no longer feels the same. And you start to wonder, where did that version of me go? Why do I feel like I've changed so much? Why can't I go back to how I used to be? And that question comes from a place of longing. A longing not just for people, but for a feeling. A feeling of ease, of comfort, of familiarity. But listen carefully, my dear brother, my dear sister. You were not meant to stay that version of yourself forever. That version of you was tied to a certain phase, a certain level of understanding, a certain set of attachments. And now Allah is rewriting you. Not because that version of you was bad, but because it was incomplete. It was dependent. It was built around things that could not last. And if you stayed that version of yourself, you would continue building your life on something temporary. So Allah allows that version to fade, not all at once, not in a way that you immediately understand, but slowly, quietly, He begins to change you. Your thoughts shift, your priorities change, your emotional responses become different. The things that once defined you no longer hold the same place in your heart. And that change feels like loss. Because you are not just losing external things. You are losing internal familiarity. You are stepping away from a version of yourself that felt known and stepping into a version that still feels unfamiliar. And that in-between space feels uncomfortable because now you don't fully recognize yourself. You don't react the same way. You don't feel the same way. You don't even think the same way. And part of you misses who you used to be. But ask yourself this, was that version of you truly stable? Was that version of you truly strong? Or was that version of you dependent on things outside of you? Because sometimes we don't miss what was good for us. We miss what was familiar. We miss what was easy. We miss what didn't require us to grow. But growth always requires change. And change always requires letting go. Letting go of people. Letting go of attachments. And sometimes letting go of the version of yourself that was tied to those things. And that is exactly what you are going through right now. You are not just being separated from something, you are being separated from who you were within it. And that is why it feels so deep. Because identity is not something we let go of easily. We hold on to it. We try to protect it. We try to return to it. because it feels safe. But Allah is not calling you back to safety. He is calling you forward into growth, into strength, into a version of yourself that is less dependent, less fragile, less controlled by what is around you. And that version of you cannot be built without letting go of the old one. And yes, that feels painful because it feels like you're losing yourself. But in reality, you are finding yourself, not the version shaped by people, not the version shaped by comfort, but the version shaped by Allah. The version that does not collapse when things change. The version that does not depend on constant validation. The version that carries a quiet strength, even in silence. And that version is being built right now. In this discomfort, in this confusion, in this feeling of not recognizing yourself fully. But my dear brother, my dear sister, this is where you have to be patient with yourself, because transformation is not instant. You don't become a new person overnight. You transition. You move slowly. You let go gradually. You understand little by little. And during that process, there will be moments where you miss the old you. Moments where you wish things felt the same again. Moments where you feel like going back. But going back is not always the answer. Because the version of you that you're missing was only meant for a certain time, a certain phase. And now you are being prepared for something different, something deeper, something more aligned with who you are becoming. And that requires you to move forward, even if it feels uncertain, even if it feels unfamiliar, even if it feels lonely. Because this loneliness is not emptiness, it is space. Space for a new version of you to grow. Space for your heart to rebuild itself. Space for your connection with Allah to become stronger. And that space is necessary. Without it, you would remain who you were, comfortable but not evolving, familiar but not growing. And Allah does not want that for you. He wants more for you. Even if that more requires discomfort, even if that more requires letting go, even if that more requires you to walk through this phase where you don't fully recognize yourself yet. Because on the other side of this phase, there is clarity, there is strength, there is a sense of peace that does not depend on anything outside of you. And when you reach that point, you will look back at this version of yourself, the one who felt lost, the one who felt like they were missing something, the one who didn't recognize themselves anymore. And you will understand. You will understand why that version had to change. You will understand why that version could not stay. And most importantly, you will be grateful. Grateful that Allah did not leave you where you were. Grateful that He rewrote you, even when it felt like you were losing yourself. Because you were never meant to stay who you were. You were always meant to become something more. And this feeling, this deep, confusing, emotional shift is the process of becoming. So be patient. Be gentle with yourself. Because you are not lost. You are being rewritten. And one day, you will finally recognize the version of yourself that Allah was building all along. One day, you look back at this loneliness and realize it was the moment everything quietly changed. My dear brother, my dear sister, right now, you're in the middle of it. In the confusion, in the heaviness, in the silence, that doesn't make sense yet. You wake up some days and still feel that weight in your chest. You go through your routine, but something inside you still feels different. You try to understand what's happening, but the answers don't fully come. And because you're inside the moment, it feels unclear. It feels messy. It feels like something is missing. But there will come a day when you are no longer inside this moment. You will be beyond it. And when you look back, everything will begin to make sense. Not all at once, but slowly, gently, like a realization that settles into your heart. You will remember these days, these quiet, heavy days, these moments where you felt alone, even when people were around you, these nights where your thoughts felt deeper than usual, these times where nothing seemed to comfort you the way it used to. And you will see them differently, not as something that broke you, but as something that changed you. Because what you don't see right now is how much is already shifting inside you. Your reactions are changing. Your priorities are changing. The way you see people, the way you understand life, the way your heart responds to things, it's all slowly being rewritten. But because the change is happening gradually, you don't notice it clearly. You only feel the discomfort of it. You only feel the in-between, the space between who you used to be and who you are becoming. And that space is uncomfortable because you don't fully belong to your past anymore, but you haven't fully settled into your future yet. So you feel like you're in between worlds, not fully connected to what was and not fully clear on what's coming. And that feeling can make you question everything. But my dear brother, my dear sister, this in-between phase is where transformation happens. Not when everything is clear, not when everything feels good, but when things feel uncertain, when things feel quiet, when things feel like they don't fully make sense. Because that is when your heart is being reshaped. That is when your reliance is shifting. That is when your understanding is deepening. Even if you don't see it yet, and one day you will see it, you will notice how certain things no longer affect you the same way. You will realize how your heart has become calmer, more stable, less dependent on what is around you. You will see how your connection with Allah has become deeper, not because someone told you to, but because you experienced what happens when everything else fades. And in that moment, you will understand something powerful. You will understand that this loneliness was never meant to destroy you. It was meant to reveal you, to reveal a version of you that could not exist in noise, that could not exist in constant distraction, that could not exist while you were deeply attached to everything around you. It needed silence. It needed space. It needed this exact phase. And that realization will change the way you see everything. Because now you will no longer fear being alone. You will no longer panic when things feel quiet. You will no longer rush to fill every empty moment, because you will understand that some of the most important things in your life are built in those exact moments, in silence, in stillness, in the unseen. And you will begin to trust it, even when it doesn't feel easy, even when it doesn't feel clear, because you've already been through it once. You've already seen what it produces. And that trust will bring a kind of peace that you didn't have before. Not the kind of peace that comes from everything going perfectly, but the kind of peace that comes from understanding that even when things feel uncertain, Allah is still working. Even when things feel quiet, Allah is still guiding. Even when you feel alone, you are not abandoned. You are being shaped. And my dear brother, my dear sister, that is what you are going through right now. You are in a phase that you will one day be grateful for. Even if it doesn't feel like it today, even if your heart still feels heavy, even if your mind still has questions, because clarity does not always come during the process. It comes after. It comes when you step back and see the full picture. And when you do, you will not wish to go back. You will not wish things stayed the same. You will not wish you avoided this phase, because you will realize this was the moment everything quietly changed. This was the moment your heart stopped settling for what was temporary. This was the moment your connection began to deepen. This was the moment you started becoming someone stronger, someone calmer, someone more grounded, someone who no longer needs everything around them to feel okay. And that version of you is worth everything you felt during this phase. So be patient, be gentle with yourself. Trust what is happening, even if you don't fully understand it yet. Because one day you will look back at this loneliness, and instead of asking, why did I go through this? You will say, I needed this. And in that moment, your heart will feel something it doesn't fully feel right now. Not confusion, not heaviness, but peace. A quiet, deep peace that comes from knowing Allah never left you. He was guiding you through a path you could not yet see. And now you finally understand.